To turn the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Pun Kelly get caught in the fake. Facts and logic with a twist of jest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. You propose the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity when they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Steam Pun Kelly with the sand clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Machine Pun Kelly here. Just a second. I'm finalizing sharing the link to the Blue Skyers of the world. So thanks for joining me today. Good news, bad news situation on the Nahan front. She's not able to join me today, but for positive reasons that I'm not able to share. But anyway, hopefully something's working out good for her. And so that's why I'm just here with my little teddy bears in the background. My wife asked me if I should be having those in the background, but hey, they're part of the family. So anyway, thanks for joining. I think today there's no guests or anything, but I have some really good news to announce. At least it's good news for me in that thanks to you guys, I just realized I made a typo. That should be all by myself, not AI by myself. My intelligence is genuine. It is not artificial. Anyway, the reason the good news is I'm sort of almost ready to be monetized on YouTube. So there's like 2 tiers, and there's like you get the first tier is at 3,000 hours where you can, sell stickers or something like that. I don't know how much that'll come out to, but then the second tier is 4,000 hours. Anyway, I hit enough hours to do the 3,000 yesterday. So that's to you guys. Thanks to you guys watching. So I really appreciate that. I literally could not have done this without you. So I'm happy about that. And it looks like I might have a co-host today after all. There he is. There's my co-host. He has decided to join the party. It's raining outside, so he can't go outside today. But anyway, that's Care Bear. You guys have heard about him. And now you've seen him. He is bathing himself. Anybody wants to say hi to Care Bear, go ahead. So anyway, I will also drop this link into here on the YouTube site. And then if you are on Blue Sky, then I'll drop it in the as a reply to my first tweet. But this right here, if you're watching and you have an opinion on something I said or would like to say, then feel free to just click on that link and join the show and share your views. So today, what I wanted to do, since we don't have my fearless co-host here or any guests, wanted to just walk through some articles from yesterday and today, and also show you something. If you're not on, if you're on Blue Sky, you should be aware of this feed. And if you're not on Blue Sky, you should be on Blue Sky, because Blue Sky rocks, because it has very cool feeds. What makes Blue Sky, in my opinion, better than everything else is that the feeds here, these are all called feeds, and each feed is a specifically curated thing, either by user or topic or whatever, but it's not like Elon gets to decide what you look at. You get to decide what you look at, and these feeds are all very, um, you know, they're set up by either you can set up your own, or different users set them up, and then you can subscribe to them. And one of my favorite ones is this one called Gift Links, Gift Articles, because that is like, if you don't want to sign up for the Washington Post or the New York Times, but they occasionally still have articles that you want to read, you can always come here and it will show you all the articles on here are gift articles you can read for free. And then there's another one that I like, and that's called News. And these aren't necessarily all free articles, but they're a good way to keep up with the news. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to go through some of these articles and look at them and just kind of share any thoughts that I have with them on share with you any thoughts on what the news is. We'll just start off with this one. I haven't read all of these yet. This one, because it's a feed, and so they're coming new. So this one is kind of interesting to me, and so we'll go to the first one and laughingly look at it, because the idea that Susan Collins is disappointed again, you guys. Susan Collins is disappointed. What are we going to do? She's still going to support him. Even Susan Collins will support RFK Jr. as U.S. Health Secretary, but she's disappointed. So the Maine Republican, considered a key swing state for many cabinet picks, did not respond to questions about why she thinks Kennedy is qualified for the role, despite his history of criticizing vaccines. She said she will support Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be the next Secretary of U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, despite his well-documented history of criticizing vaccines and spreading the debunked theory that they cause autism. In a written statement that takes courage to make a written statement that you won't respond to questions to and will hide behind. Collins said her support comes after extensive public and private questioning and through an examination of his nomination, and when she received assurances from Kennedy that he would support ongoing development of a Lyme disease vaccine. Okay, a Lyme disease vaccine? Like, there's one vaccine that he assured her that he will support? What about all the other ones? What about is he still like going to support polio vaccines? Kennedy or Collins is just, can we just call her a spineless asshole at this point? She has zero conviction on anything. In response to my questioning, the Help Committee hearing, Mr. Kennedy committed to support Maine Health's development of a vaccine for Lyme disease, as well as research for both chronic and infectious disease. But that's all right. Children will die of polio. The research for the Lyme disease vaccine will go on. Like, what a gutless thing to do. What a gutless coward. I cannot believe this guy is going to become the Secretary of Health and Human Services. This guy is the most ignorant possible choice. Anyway, I'm extremely disturbed about this. And I don't understand why everybody on the planet is not. Like, I don't see how anybody with a brain could actually say he should be this, the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Maybe it's not, or a spine, I guess. Well, Collins' office did not respond to questions about why she thinks he is qualified. Why don't you just say it honestly? Collins hid behind the door rather than answer honest questions about why she is being so disingenuous. CNN's Manu Raju posted on the social platform X that Collins told him Monday that she plans to support Kennedy to oversee the nation's healthcare system. This post only quotes Collins discussing her concerns about the National Institute of Health cutting biomedical research funding, not why she thinks Kennedy should be confirmed. But I mean, like, isn't that like something she should be doing? And shouldn't she be defending why she's doing it if she's concerned about his cutting biomedical research funding? This week, I contacted Mr. Kennedy about the administration's decision to impose an arbitrary cap on the indirect costs that are part of the National Institute of Health grants and negotiated between the grant recipient, blah, blah, blah. He stated that as soon as he is confirmed, he will lead a re-examination of this initiative. Oh, a re-examination. He's going to look at it again. Like, what does that even mean? Like, that doesn't mean that he's going to bring it back. It just means he's going to re-examine it, which will probably mean that he will reinforce this unconstitutional thing. And, you know, this has kind of flown under the radar a little bit, the way that they've banned, or they've cut a lot of the funding on a lot of this research stuff, because it's ending funding on things, and it's gonna be hard to how do you do that? Like, how do you just end research funding? Do you really think that America's like getting be great again because we ended research funding on anything? I don't. Anyway, so much for that one. Let's go look at another article. Okay, go back to the GIFs. I really should be doing this on a 2-computer setup. Okay, so here. This one looks interesting. So Trump's war. Trump's war on DEI is really a cold war, is really a war on civil rights. And it really is. And this is by Jamel, I don't know if I'm saying his name, Bowie. This guy is awesome. If you're not following him on Blue Sky, he's got a great account. He's also a very, very like informative, intelligent person who I have learned a lot from. So anyway, you should definitely follow this guy. I don't know if he's on Twitter or not. I found him on Blue Sky. So he says, the genius of the right-wing crusade against diversity, equity, and inclusion is that the term is amorphous enough that it can mean many different things to many different people. To a certain set of well-meaning cultural liberals, DEI refers mainly to HR mandates and ineffectual diversity training. If those people work in progress, nonprofits, or any other space that attracts young left-leaning DEI, might also mean the aggravating use of clumsy acronyms like BIPOC, BIP, how is it? Like, anyway, or linguistic inventions like Latinx. For people of a more moderate or conservative persuasion, DEI might mean affirmative action and the elevation of unqualified people to sensitive and high status positions. Although how one knows they are unqualified is often left unsaid. It might also mean the public adherence to liberal shibboleths about diversity, virtue signaling by woke elites in academia and the corporate world. Yes. This is all, yeah. Everything he's saying is absolutely right. Everybody interprets it to mean their own thing, and what it actually means is kind of lost in all of that. There is also a related and not altogether incorrect view from the political left that DEI is just a smokescreen for capital and its servants, a multicultural gloss on the neoliberal agendas of the managerial class, whether corporate bean counters or university administrators. The upshot of the many yearning meanings of DEI is that when President Trump announced at the start of his term that he wanted to uproot DEI from the federal government, there was some sympathy and even agreement from those who otherwise opposed to the administration and its overall program. If nothing else, effectively ending the battle over DEI might clear the space for a kind of politics left focused on diversity and inclusion than more material concerns. So, just like I've been kind of diving into the DEI thing, had a couple of interviews recently, and I'm working on a whiteboard that I should be releasing today. And DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he's right. There is a lot of weirdness that goes on with it, both on the left and on the right. But really, it's not that, it should not be that controversial. And it's not just about race. Diversity just means different kinds of people exist. And it's not, while it's certainly partly about race, it's also about all kinds of other things. It's about gender. It's about handicaps. It's about whether you're on the spectrum. It's about, whether you're fat or skinny. You can even say that there are, tall people make more money than short people. Attractive people make more money than ugly people. There is a lot of things that are just, simply physical attributes or things you have nothing to do with that determine how much money you make and whether or not you can get jobs and whether or not you get promoted, whether you're a male or a female. All of these things are unconscious biases that are in our mentalities, and diversity, equity, and inclusion is mostly just about recognizing those biases and doing what we can to remove those biases from ourselves so that people aren't unfairly punished for things they have nothing to do with. So there shouldn't be anything controversial about it. Like, people say, oh, I don't see color. And it's like, okay, then if you don't see color, how do you see a diversity hire? Like, if you're not bothered by racism, you shouldn't be bothered by DEI, but that's a whole other thing. Then we have to remember that DEI also means something to people on the political right, from the reactionaries who lead the White House to the propagandists who carry their message to the masses. For them, DEI is less white fragility and silly posters about white supremacy culture than it is the mere presence of a woman or non-white person or disabled or transgender person in any high-skilled, high-status position. And their alternative isn't some heretofore unknown standard of merit. It is the reintroduction of something like segregation. And he's right. They want to make this about, opposition. The opposition to DEI is merit. Oh, I just believe whoever gets the job should have the most merit. It should just be earned all on your own. Well, but then what you're saying is that this transgender person that got the job, or this person of color that got the job, or this woman that got the job, they didn't get it based on merit. So you're making an assumption that they didn't get it based on merit. And you're saying that you're not racist or sexist or transphobic or whatever. Like, what is your basis for saying they didn't have it based on merit, other than that they got the job that straight white cisgender people were applying for? Consider the ways the administration has tried to carry out the president's executive encyclical against DEI, which called for federal agencies to relentlessly combat private sector discrimination and faithfully advance the Constitution's promise of colorblind equality before the law. How can you say it's colorblind when you're literally looking for Black people that got jobs? How come not a single DEI hire you're firing was a white person? At the national, a white male, because there's white women that are, shocked that the leopard is eating their face. At the National Security Agency, it has meant an affront to purge all NSA websites and internal networks of banned words such as diversity, diverse, inclusive, racism, and racial identity. Like, if you are saying that you can't say racism, you are a racist. There is no like, oh, well, how can you do that? how can you say that saying racism is race? That's like saying recognizing racism makes you a racist. Over at the Department of Defense, led by drunken wife beater Pete Hegseth, a former Fox News host, it has meant the end of official recognition of Black History Month. Yes, because somehow if you recognize Black people did things in history, then that's being racist. The disbanding of affinity groups at service academies and a move to curb military outreach to Black professionals in engineering and the sciences. Diversity, Hegseth says, is not our strength. Why not? Why would not diversity be a strength? If they talk about it like they talk about DEI and merit as in relationship to quotas, and it's like it is not. DEI is not saying, okay, we need to have 12% of our workforce Black. It is saying that our outreach needs to extend to 100% of the population. Like, you can't just reach out to white, straight, male people and think that you are getting the very best possible people, because you're excluding 2/3 of the population of the United States. How can you exclude 2/3 of the people and say that you have the best? This is like going back to segregated baseball, to where you don't allow any Black baseball players in, and you say, look, we've got the very best players, but you didn't have the very best players, did you? That's what they want to do. Diversity. Let's see if I'm not just going to check back here. No comments. Okay. Wonder if anybody's actually watching. Hopefully somebody's watching. It's harder to do this by myself. So anyway, anybody wants to pop on, just let me know. There's more. In addition to purging the Department of Justice of anything that smacks of DEI, Attorney General Pam Bondi has instructed the agency to target the private sector for diversity programs for potential criminal investigation. What does that even mean? Criminal investigation for what? What kind of crime? Like it's a crime to hire Black people now? A company that wants to increase its proportion of female employees or place more Black Americans in corporate leadership may find itself in the crosshairs of the federal government. Can you imagine that? They're going to go and prosecute somebody for hiring a Black person, but they're not. The problem to them is hiring a Black person, not prosecuting somebody for hiring a Black person. Because if you hired a Black person, clearly you hired them over a more qualified white person. Therefore, you are a racist. That's their view, that it's impossible for a Black person to be better qualified than a white person. It's impossible for a woman to be more qualified than a male. It's impossible for a transgender person to be more qualified than a cisgender person. It's impossible for a gay person to be more qualified than a straight person. The best, most qualified person for every job has to be a cisgender straight white male. That's their viewpoint. And if you don't accept that, then you are the racist. That's what they're saying. And they're saying it to the point that they're literally going to criminalize actually hiring somebody that's not a white Christian male. You'll find the surest evidence of the real meaning of the president's anti-DEI order in that fact that also dismantled a decades-old requirement originally promulgated by President Lyndon Johnson that federal contractors tried to employ more women, Black Americans, and in the years since, other people of color. One imagines that Johnson's opponents, like the segregationist senators James Eastland and Strom Thurmwood, would have been pleased to see his handiwork and that of a generation of civil rights lawyers tossed aside with the stroke of a pen. Like, I don't, how do you, if you are, like one of those, I'm not a racist, how do you defend this? What is your defense of this? I would really love to hear somebody say why it's okay to go out and just criminalize hiring Black people. So anyway, I think this is a great article. This one I have already read. I won't read the whole thing because it gets a bit long. But I hope you can go back and read this. I think that we really need to talk more about the whole DEI thing. Because I think that it's not getting the attention it needs in the press. It's kind of just being accepted as like this thing Trump is doing. This is the cost of being, he won the White House. But I don't think that the overt racism of it all, like the assumption that anybody that got a job other than a white Christian male is somehow, that white Christian male has been wronged. Like every white Christian male has to be more qualified for every job than anyone that is not a white Christian male. Okay. So I'm scrolling through a Get article. Oh. So here, let's look at this one. This one looks like it could be interesting. This is another one I have not read yet. Inflation rises unexpectedly, complicating picture for the Fed. The consumer price index rose 3% from a year earlier as food and energy prices picked up. So inflation is going up under Trump. Oh no, oh no. I thought he was going to solve everything. I thought it was all Biden's fault. Oh, when are we going to have the universal panic? When are we going to blame Trump for all of this? Oh no, what will we do? U.S. inflation rose to 3% in January, strengthening the case for the Federal Reserve to extend a pause on interest rate cuts. So now inflation's going up, so we're not going to cut the interest rates like, we were promised. This was all going to be, Trump was going to solve all of this, but he's not. The consumer price index jumped more than expected. You hear that? More than expected. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed on Wednesday rising 0.5% from December. Oh, who was president in December? In what was the fastest monthly increase since August of 2023. So it's not just went up. It's back up to more than it was more than a year ago. Last month, the annual pace was 2.9%. Core CPI, which more closely reflects underlying inflation by removing volatile food and energy prices, also showed little improvement. It rose 0.4% from December, or 3.3% on a year-over-year basis, both higher than economists expected. The monthly increase in core prices was the highest since April of 2023. So all the work that has been done since the Inflation Reduction Act, which didn't do anything to replace inflation apparently, but then improved inflation, even though it's didn't do anything according to some people. Well, all of that's been reversed. The January data underscored that even the uneven nature of the central bank's battle against high prices, inflation has subsided drastically since cresting just above 9% in 2022, but progress in recent months has been much more sporadic. Last month, Price hikes in sectors closely watched by consumers, from groceries to gasoline, offset declines in other categories like clothing and furniture. Grocery prices climbed 0.5% compared with the previous month, or 1.9% on a yearly basis. So anyway, that was driven in large part by nationwide egg shortage. Woohoo! Caused by an outbreak of avian influenza or bird flu, which has pushed prices up 15.2% over the last 4 weeks. So why is it that all of a sudden everybody is like very aware of the egg prices being driven by the bird flu when nobody mentioned that ahead of the election, and it was the same damn reason? No, a year ago, egg prices were the direct result of Joe Biden personally setting the price of eggs on everything. Since last year, egg prices are up 53%. It was the largest monthly increase in egg prices since June 2015, accounting for roughly 2/3 of the total increase in grocery prices since December. Gasoline prices. I was told that Donald Trump was going to make gasoline prices go down again, but no. Also rose another 1.8% over the course of the month, although they are down 0.2% compared to the same time last year. Among other categories to increase were airline fares and hotel rates, used cars and trucks, as well as automobile insurance. All of these things were just Joe Biden's fault, But apparently, Donald Trump is not making them better. I wonder why. Economists have closely watched for further improvements in housing-related costs, a slowdown that began to show up in the data at the end of last year. So they were getting better under Biden, and now they're getting worse under Trump. But they will say that, oh, this is just Trump inherited what Biden's mess was. Even though they were getting better under Biden, now they're worse under Trump. Jonathan Wright, a former Fed economist, now at Johns Hopkins University, said the latest data reinforces the picture of inflation getting stuck around 3% and the last percentage point becoming very difficult to achieve. Why wasn't it difficult to it? Why weren't we hearing this in November or in October? We were told that Donald Trump was going to take care of inflation. He was going to make it all go away. Now we're getting excuses. And I'm not saying that the president can make inflation go away. What I am saying is that when Trump is president, all of a sudden they're treating inflation honestly. But when Biden was president, they did not treat it dishonestly. Or they did treat it dishonestly. Why are they all of a sudden speaking about inflation as though it's not all the president's fault? Or more accurately, why were they acting like it was all the president's fault? So, anyway, the TLDR, inflation is getting worse, and Trump is not making it better. Okay, this one looks like it could be interesting. Okay. This one's all right, let's see if there are 2 checks on a president's power. One is missing. All right. It's safe to assume that the phrase constitutional crisis, like the word emoluments 8 years ago, is not something which most Americans have intimate, polished familiarity. This is not an indictment of the public education or anything like that. Nuanced considerations of outlier elements of the American system of government have generally been the purview of scholars rather than the public. I will say this much. I make a point to read the entire Constitution once a year, and everybody should. You should know what's in the Constitution. And it's amazing to me that people that talk about the Constitution this, the Constitution that, have never read it, or they haven't read it in 50 years or whatever. Like, there are some things, like how many Supreme Court justices does the Constitution should say should be there should be? Like those are questions that you should know the answer to. And if you don't know the answer, look it up. But there are people that will get that answer wrong. The answer, by the way, is it doesn't say how many there should be. But the past few years have unfortunately necessitated that we engage in crass courses on legal esoterica. Over the last 3 weeks, that's meant a pass-fail course on the limits of the constitutional government, subject on which most Americans now profess to have an opinion. The polling from YouGov recently asked an unadorned question to the point, did Americans agree that the U.S. is in a constitutional crisis? Most respondents, 54% of them, said it was. Democrats were more likely to hold that view, probably unsurprisingly given the extent to which media outlets trusted by the Democrats have recently offered ad hoc Crisis 101 seminars through their coverage. That said, even 3 in 10 Republicans think that there is a constitutional crisis. You know what I don't like about some of these opinion polls is they make it seem like this is an opinion. Whether you think it or not, we are in a constitutional crisis. I don't care what Republicans think about it or what Democrats think about it. You literally have a president of the United States trying to take away constitutional powers written in the Constitution given to the Congress, and they are trying to take away constitutional powers written in the Constitution given to the Supreme Court or the judicial branch. There is a reason we have a separation of powers, and the Donald Trump's administration, whether that includes Donald Trump or not is questionable, but his little minions and whatnots, the Stephen Miller succubuses, they're trying to take away constitutional powers provided in the Constitution from the Republican Party or from the Congress. And I really don't understand why there are senators that are voting for people to like literally take away their authority. Like back in the 80s, there was something that George W. Bush was, or H.W. Bush was always, give me a line item veto. I want a line item veto. Line item veto was just that he could go through the budget and he could delete a certain, funding for certain things, and be able to say and then sign the rest of the bill. The reason that you can't do that is that everything is worked out by compromise. And if a line item veto is allowed, then that compromise is not allowed. The Congress can compromise on something, and then whoever the president is, whatever their party is, they can just go out and eliminate all the compromises that were established. And so it takes away the power of the minority party to negotiate with the majority party. So line item veto is bad. Or in some cases, like if one party has the two houses of Congress, and the White House has the and then the other party has the White House, then even with both houses of Congress, the president could override both houses of Congress in a line item veto. So you can't do that even in a current budget. What the Republicans are trying to do is they're trying to say that an unelected person can be given the power that even the president of the United States doesn't have, to go through and just remove budget items that Congress has already approved of. Not only that, not only can they do it for the current budget, they can do it for past budgets from past Congresses. So if something is still on the book from 8 years ago, then Elon Musk can just decide, yeah, we're not going to pay that anymore. So he, like powers that no one has ever even thought to have are suddenly given to this unelected person. And I don't care that he's an immigrant. I'm not going to make a big deal of that. I know some people, like to make a big deal of that because he's so anti-immigrant. But I'm not going to be an asshole just because he is. I am against somebody having power that is not in the constitutional. It is not a question whether we're in a constitutional crisis. You have an all-out assault on the Constitution, and anybody who's a patriot, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat, should be opposed to it. How do you think that the Republicans would respond if, let's say, that the next person that wins the White House is a Democrat, provided there is an election again, of course. But let's say there is somehow an election and the Democrats actually win. And then they appoint George Soros head of the Doge. And then George Soros decides he's just going to cut ICE. And he's going to cut all deportation funding. How do you think the Republicans would respond to that? Because that's what they're voting for right now, is they are voting for somebody to have the authority to do that. They're looking at it in terms of what Musk is doing and not in terms of the precedent for the power Musk is being given. And you have to, this is just any MAGAs, ask them how they would feel if that were the case. Because I don't think that, they need to, realize what's going on here. It is incredibly damaging what kind of power Musk is being given. And he is certainly not a person that's going to treat this power responsibly or honestly. And that makes it even worse. But even underlying all of that is the fact that it is the most disruptive thing to our democracy in the history of the country. And I don't think I'm being at all hyperbolic when I say that. So yes, we're in a constitutional crisis. Many Republicans, though, take an inverse view. The crisis isn't that Trump and his administration are trying to consolidate power in the White House by sidestepping progress or ignoring courts' rules. It's that the courts are trying to prevent him from doing that. The courts are not trying to prevent him from doing that. The courts are trying to prevent him from violating the Constitution. And again, so that's why I would what if you just change the president and the scenario, but you give them the same powers? Would J.D. Vance agree with that? I don't think so. It's a view that's in keeping with polling assessing the perceived threat to democracy last year. Democrats were worried that Trump might reject the result of the 2024 presidential contest, as he did when he alleged that his 2020 loss was a function of non-existent voter fraud. Republicans, meanwhile, often agree that democracy was under threat from voter fraud. There was no voter fraud. See, this is one of those false equivalences that the media pounds down, right? And the thing is, Donald Trump literally did try to overthrow the 2020 election. That's what the whole Green Bay sweep was, January 6th. It wasn't just about January 6th. It wasn't just about that day. That was one move in the game. And the overall goal was to overthrow the election. It was to throw chaos and confusion on the electoral vote so that they could say, oh, look, nobody knows who the real electoral votes are. Let's send it back to Congress. And then there would be this, both houses of Congress would have their little vote, and then they would set aside the actual results of the election and name Donald Trump as president. That was the goal. He literally did try to reject the results of the 2020 election. That is nothing like what the Republicans are saying when they said that there was voter fraud. There is no evidence of voter fraud. And there's no evidence of voter fraud because there is no voter fraud. Even when they say there's no evidence of voter fraud. Well, then it's like, okay, just because there's no evidence doesn't mean nobody did it. But nobody did it. There was no voter fraud. There just wasn't. Stop saying there wasn't evidence of it. Just start saying there wasn't. And if you want to show that there was, show it. But you can't show voter fraud. So if you can't show voter fraud, there wasn't voter fraud. Stop making it sound like there's a discussion to be had. What's striking about the current discussion of the crisis posed by Trump's effort to consolidate power is how often it centers on the courts. The debate focuses on the extent to which Trump and his administration have complied or will comply with court orders on the powers that exist, which might force him to do so. That answer is not many, is clearly one reason that Trump is pushing boundaries in a way that he is. So this is all about, okay, so if the court makes a decision, does Trump just ignores it, the court can't do anything. It's goes back to the Marshall Court, I think, Andrew Jackson. What is the quote? It's Justice Marshall's, not Justice. Anyway, something like it's Justice Marshall's decision. Let him enforce it. But I don't think it was Marshall. It was somebody else. My brain's getting older. But yeah. The focus on the courts, though, ignores the constitutional tension that's been roiling for years, a crisis that is now so old that we can essentially declare a victory. This has not been roiling for years. This is all new. Nobody's been talking about, the president can just become a dictator. No, that's not roiling for years. That's new. There are supposed to be two checks on Trump's power, of course, the courts and Congress, but Congress, particularly in the Trump area and almost entirely through the indifference of Republicans, has abdicated that role. And they have, but they can only abdicate the role for their term, not for every term. Like past Congresses, their budget should still apply. Even if you want to say that, Lindsey Graham is a little whore bitch, that's fine. He can be a little whore bitch, but he can't be a little whore bitch for the previous Congress. That already, those laws were already passed and signed. So he says the acute constitutional crisis of the past 3 weeks is an offshoot of the chronic crisis of the congressional fealty to Donald Trump. That I'll agree with, because it is like a Donald Trump era thing. One irony is in that development is that Republicans were relentless, insisting that Barack Obama's presidency was unacceptably centered on executive power. Obama often relied on executive orders to effect or try to change in part because congressional Republicans were obstinate in blocking his legislative agenda. There were more filibusters in Obama's presidency than in the rest of the history, and then in the entire history of the country combined before he was president. Among the root causes of that obstruction was a spike in partisan hostility and the same detachment from reality on the right that aided Trump's own rise to power. Trump's first term in office began with a number of executive actions. Joe Biden's term began with still more, and in each case, the new presidents often presented their action as checks on their predecessors' executive checks. By the time Trump took office for the second time in January, though, a different point was being made. Trump was using the scale and scope of his executive decisions to suggest that he, as chief executive, had the unconstrained power to do what he was doing. It's likely, for example, that Trump broke out issues such as immigration into multiple orders, in part because more orders implied more action and more authority. So this is actually pretty, wow. So Trump has already signed 75, or what it looks like about 60 more than twice as many executive orders in this period than in any term in history. House Speaker Mike Johnson says the court should take a step back and let this process play out. No, they shouldn't. Why should they let the process play out? Like, I don't even, I wish the media would push back on some of this and just say, why? What does that mean? Play out? play out how? What is, like, please explain what you mean by this process play out. Please tell me what that means. Did you sue Joe Biden to block anything he did? Again, this is a new development when Donald Trump was caught withholding aid to Ukraine during his first term in office. I don't think I'm getting. All right, you know what? Anyway, I don't think this is going anywhere. I think nobody's listening. So yeah, I would be bored too. I don't blame you. All right, I'm gonna take off. Hopefully tomorrow, Nehan will be back. But anyway, use that feed if you're still out there. It's a good feed. You get a lot of free articles. Okay, bye.